Hi, I'm Kala Asi, and today is a good day to try something different on this channel. Language change is something I'm a big fan of. For quite a while now I've had this idea of taking a language and forcing its evolution over time, trying to mimic IRL language change as much as possible. And, well, me and a few other folks from Wapona have tried it. In May 2021, we started Toki Pekama Ante, where we took Toki Pona and, through regularly scheduled voting periods, we proposed and voted on suggestions to change the phonology, morphosyntax and lexicon. And, well, how did it do? I'd say it went better than I expected. Primarily because people were actually interested and ran with the idea. However, what the community ended up creating diverged enough from what I wanted to experiment with, which was frankly inevitable if we're being honest, to the point that I can't really reconcile the two. So this is where I shall be trying my ideas. To begin with, I need to pick the set of vocabulary and syntactic rules this language will start with, as Toki Pona notably has different variations, some more, some less like one another. So where should the line be drawn between what we include or exclude from this? Thankfully, I happen to be writing this part of the script exactly when Ku dropped, which essentially solves the problem for us. I will be using all Nimipu and Nimiku Suli, and also whatever grammar I think exists in the book. I'm saying I think because, well, I don't actually have my hands on the book, and I can't guarantee I ever will, so going by what feels right is about the best option I have here. With the Ku stuff out of the way, it is also at this point that I am willing to make a crucial decision not to include any more roots derived from outside Toki Pona. Any new word I wish to coin must be created using the roots that the language already possesses. This limitation has several main advantages. First, it forces me to actually pay close attention to derivation strategies, something that I think is pretty neat to explore in a Toki Pona context. Second, it prevents the language change part from feeling like, oh, let's borrow this neat word from Tokima, or Arabic, or Proto-Indo-European, or whatever other neat languages I could come up with. Such tendencies just leave you feeling like with each evolution step there is less and less of the original Toki Pona left in the language, which is not the feeling I wish this project to have. And third, which I think might be the coolest part, it also means that at every step of the way I can use unchanged Sitalan Pona as part of the glossing, providing you with a way to interpret words and sentences even at a point where the words in isolation start looking unrecognizable to a Toki Pona speaker, which was something problematic we've encountered in Toki Pekama Ante. Now that that's all said and done, let's get started by talking about the phonologic litination. I want to start by introducing something that Toki Pona famously wants to avoid, putting morphemes together and treating them as parts of a single word. Specifically, I would like to describe this in two parts, as inflection and derivation. Let's start with derivation because, well, I think I have less to say here. In a nutshell, the first thing I'm going to do is lexicalize things. Now, before I get burnt at the stake, let me state my reasoning. This is the most obvious first step for Toki Pona evolution in a naturalistic setting, as the language transitions from essentially being a pidgin to something that can readily be applied to any topic that its speakers encounter. While ambiguity is alright for a pidgin and is certainly in line with Toki Pona's philosophy, you can imagine this derived conlang as losing its connection to the philosophy and instead trying to solve ambiguities much like natural languages usually do. Oh, and this includes, as much as it pains me to say it, a system for counting, as, well, the hypothetical users of this conlang would probably be interested in, at the very least, keeping track of their animals. The system I decided to go for should be familiar to the people in the community as it closely resembles the system that was, to my knowledge, optionally given in Po, besides, well, not counting at all. I did, however, stop the list of numbers at 10. I will assume counting on fingers is significantly more prevalent than counting beyond that, so the need for numbers 11 and above was not strong enough to call for words to be made. I considered stopping at 20 instead, as it is a much more interesting base to work with, but the words for the most part get an additional luka, which is not exciting enough to commit to. There shall be deliberation on further counting later on, but for now it is not a priority. So yeah, let's look at some other compounds. Here are some of them. The meanings I imply behind these compounds should hopefully be obvious. Oh yeah, and I say some compounds because I don't want to coin a lot of words in one go, since it's likely some of them won't actually be immediately useful. But at the same time, I would rather like to hear some suggestions on which words would be. Then I'll retroactively add them in the pinned comment or something. And also, frankly, I don't currently have the creativity to think of good words to coin, so I'm leaving more of this for later. Assuming there is a later. So anyway, a couple of non-obvious things to point out about these new words. First, the existence of these compounds now allows the language to distinguish between, for example, a cat and a soft animal, two categories of animals that are definitely not identical. And the two might look and sound very similar right now, but with enough changes down the line, the difference should become quite obvious. Second, for all compounds, I will leave the stress where it was in the second word, rather than the first, as it creates an unpredictable stress system, at least if you don't know etymologies, which might be interesting down the line. Also, I just generally pronounce these common combinations of words stressing the second word more. Now on to inflection, and if you've seen Toki Pikama Ante, quite a few parts of this will look familiar to you. In a nutshell, I will be integrating commonly used morphemes such as prepositions, particles, preverbs into the word, reanalyzing their role as inflection. This also has the much desired side effect of explicitly marking words for their parts of speech, for example making nouns distinct from verbs. This is also where I start to diverge from Tokipona as it is currently used in the community at large by introducing additional inflection. So let's get started with this. First, nouns. The prepositions, also particles, if your analysis puts NE into that category, are now integrated into the noun, becoming case marking. Some of you may be surprised to see N as a case marker. Isn't it meant to be AND? But this is a grammar take from this year's April Fools. I think it is neat enough to be accepted in this conlang. Also B deserves special attention. In current Tokipona, the role of B is very much syntactic, as it serves to resolve important ambiguities that let the language express a lot of ideas more clearly. These syntactic ambiguities arise mostly from nouns and adjectives, but this conlang will soon add enough marking to make this ambiguity resolved. So with this, B becomes a marker for genitives, as a case marker, and also adjectives. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, I will also make the radical move of adding obligatory number marking on nouns. The markers I chose are mute for plurative, one for collective, and tasso for singulative. This is, of course, not the most common way people mark for number in Tokipona nowadays. While mute for plurals is widespread, the other two are essentially just made up by me, so I feel like I should explain my choice here. I considered going for a typical singular-plural distinction, but it was kind of boring, and it left the singular quite obviously unmarked, and number marking is something I want so that nouns and adjectives are distinct. The tripartite distinction between singulative, collective, and plurative seems to solve both problems. Case and number marking also applies to pronouns mi, sina, ona, li, and perhaps notably also to seme. Note that ni and seme may take marking like a noun or like an adjective. Also because of this noun, the nm and nn limitation is gone. Now that we're done with nouns, and also adjectives and also prepositions, let's talk about verbs. If there's one thing we can be certain about, it's that commonly used Tokipona lacks any tense marking. If the speaker feels there needs to be a time reference, it's done through explicitly giving one. However, aspect and mood, one may argue, is closely tied to the verb in the form of preverbs. Since preverbs are a bit of a loose category and vary in their usage, it's pretty hard for me to come up with a list that I'm satisfied with, and that doesn't contradict real usage too much. But yeah, here are the ones I decided to include. Mood-wise, we have alasa for attempting things, sona for abilities or knowing things, or for commands and wishes, wile for desires and requirements, and of course you may choose to leave the mood unmarked, yielding the indicative. The rest of the preverbs become aspects: open for starting an action, bini for finishing an action, kama for an action in its entirety, leaving it unmarked for an action in its duration, and then there's ken. Okay, I've strayed a fair bit from regular Tokipona usage here, but I have a reason for doing so. Ken is normally used for possibilities and sometimes for abilities, which puts it in a little bit of a conflict with sona, which is, while less frequently used as a preverb, is still kinda accepted, and frankly I kinda just liked it and wanted to keep it. So instead, Ken shifts in meaning to instead represent common, typical situations, which makes it habitual. Thus we end up with a fairly common perfective, imperfective, habitual trinity, augmented by the inclusion of an inchoative and cessative. Pretty neat in my opinion. And before I forget, there are negatives and interrogatives in this language, aren't there? Here I want to do something quite similar to Toki Pikama Ante. The direct questions get partially reduplicated, specifically the first syllable of the verb, including the now bound preverbs. Then you have ala, reduced to just la if the previous syllable ended in a consonant, and then comes the rest of the verb. If the verb, or a noun or an adjective or a pronoun for that matter, is negative, it gets ala, or again la, as a suffix. Oh, and after this step, li becomes incorporated into the verb as well, including where it used to previously be dropped because of me or sina. And finally we can move on to phonology. Geez, I've been waiting for a while for this section. It's probably no secret to you that Tokipono's phonology is on the small side of things, at a pretty tiny 9 consonants and a moderate 5 vowels. Additionally, the syllable structure is quite limiting. So what's the plan? In short, I will juggle consonant variety, vowel variety, and redundancy to eventually get more consonant stuff and more complex syllables, all while making the vowels less transparent to Tokipono speakers. So let's get to it! First, let's do something with the clusters that already exist in Tokipono. For nasal obstruent clusters, let's turn them into a corresponding voiced obstruent. For m, n, l, for obvious reasons, voicing isn't an option, so let's say the coda n assimilates into the consonant, making it geminated. I was initially going to do the same for the nw cluster, but for fun, and also because I don't really enjoy how geminated w sounds like, let's say nasalization was strong enough that gemination resulted in m instead. I am also singling out ny as a special case because the palatal nasal is such a common phoneme that it's difficult to imagine the assimilation to end up as anything but that. One option I considered was making it geminated, which would then give the sound changes for nw and ny the same description, but I decided against it since the language doesn't have a non-geminated version of it. Worst case scenario, we can imagine it got geminated. Note, by the way, that coda n still exists, just word finally. We can deal with it at a later point of the language. The second sound change I'm introducing. The front vowels palatalize the preceding consonant, and the back vowels labialize the preceding consonant. Well, I say palatalize and labialize, but in order to better deal with a few quirky edge cases, let's actually treat them as appending a y or a w in front of the vowel. This description immediately covers word initial positions, and it also gives us some awkward semivowel sequences. Let's say that the first semivowel in such sequences belongs to the coda of one syllable, and the second to the onset of the next. Now let's deal with all the other consonant clusters we've just created. Also, I just realized that words are becoming so unrecognizable I need to start using Sita-Dantpona. So the palatalized coronals and velars become post-alveolar, with some mergers because of it. I am keeping palatalized labials around, however. Oh yeah, this change applies to sonorants too. Meanwhile, the contrast between labialized and regular consonants turns into a fortis-lenis contrast. This is kind of a cheap move on my part, since I am essentially giving up on anything cool labialization could have resulted in, like qu going to p, but those possibilities didn't mesh with my idea of where to take this, so bear with me here. For sonorants, the distinction between gemination and fortis-lenis collapses, and the fortis consonants become geminated. I am also allowing the nw to mm sound change to happen again. Maybe in reality the two occurrences of this first merged with each other, and only then the sound change happened, but I don't really want to dive into this rabbit hole, so let's just move on. The fortis fricatives strengthen into affricates, with lenis fricatives remaining as is. And finally the lenis stops lenite into fricatives, while the fortis stops take their place as the unmarked stops in the system. This gives us the final consonant inventory of this version of the language. And now we can return to vowels. Since the language can now distinguish between syllables with e, a, and o through consonants, there is less of a force to keep them distinct from each other. So, in a move that reminds me of Indo-Iranian, the three vowels merge into a, leaving us with a three-vowel system. Of course, there are also a few coda semivowels from earlier, but let's not deal with them. For now, they're just consonants that don't have anything to do with the vowel changes. Now that e, o are missing, we can introduce a touch of, vowel harmony? Well, not quite. I'd rather call it long-distance vowel assimilation. Specifically, any instance of a followed in the next syllable by e will assimilate its frontness and become e. A similar thing will happen to u, with a becoming o. We are now back at a 5-vowel system, with the caveat that e, o in this system are, for now, allophonic. And this is where I would like to stop the changes for now. Obviously, this is not the final definitive version, and there never should be, since the concept implies infinite evolution with no particular endpoint. Among the things I would like to do from here onwards would be to drop some of the vowels based on stress, get rid of semivowels in the coda, evolve long vowels, change something into h, simplify some of the lengthier phonemes, Kepiken, I'm looking at you, and let morphemes, both dependent and independent, undergo a whole bunch of semantic shift. Someone please remind me to make follow-up the next time a big anniversary rolls around. But for now, let me end the video with the very beginning of the Tower of Babel. La jabepiniwan pimuchala, yanyaman piyale liwan, lichadeci piwan, yanyomuche liteci yeni, liwafeli yatammawan pizzuli. That's it, folks.